I remember that night the way you remember a smell. Not because it was dramatic, not because anyone screamed, not because the building caught fire. I remember it because everything stayed quiet, even when it shouldn't have. And because of the footprints. They were the kind you don't forget once you've really seen them. I was working the front desk at a roadside motel off a 2-lane highway, one of those places built for people who didn't want to be seen and didn't ask questions. A long strip of rooms in a horseshoe, lobby in the middle, vending machine that ate your money, ice machine that sounded like it was choking. On a normal night shift, nothing happened. That's what made it easy. You checked people in. You handed out keys. You watched the security monitor like it was a campfire. You drank burnt coffee. You waited for morning. But this wasn't a normal night. The storm had been on the radio since noon. Every station saying the same thing in different voices. Blizzard warning. Whiteout conditions. Travel not advised. By the time I came in around 9, the snow was already coming down hard. The kind that falls sideways. The motel sign out front looked like it was getting erased inch by inch. I parked crooked, fought my way through wind that punched my cheeks numb, and rushed into the lobby with my collar up like that would help. Inside, the lobby smelled like radiator heat and lemon cleaner. The old space heater behind the desk clicked and hummed, trying its best. My manager had left a sticky note. Storm night. If highway closes, don't let anyone leave. Call me if any trouble. That was the whole plan. I hung my coat on the back hook, poured myself coffee from the pot that had been cooking all day, and sat down at the desk. The security cameras showed the lot, the walkway, the corners of the building. The feeds were grainy, black and white, and already half obscured by blowing snow. A couple of guests were already stuck. I'd seen them when I came in. Middle-aged couple with a dog, one guy with a duffel bag and a work jacket, a woman in a knit hat who looked like she'd been crying or just tired in a way that made your face sag. They were all tucked into rooms now, the way people do when the world outside becomes too loud. The storm got worse. It always gets worse at night, like the dark gives it permission. I heard the wind screaming around the corners of the building. I heard ice pellets ticking against the lobby window. Every so often the power flickered, the lights dimming just enough to make my stomach tighten, then returning. I told myself it was normal. It was just weather. Around 10:30 my phone buzzed with a weather alert, then a second one. The highway was closing. I sat back in my chair and stared at the security monitor, watching the lot vanish behind sheets of snow. The road out front disappeared completely, like the motel had been dropped into blank paper. I thought, okay, so we're trapped. No big deal. That's the thing about working the night shift in a place like that. Being trapped doesn't feel unusual. You're always trapped, just in different ways. At 11, I did my routine. I checked the vending machine. I walked the lobby. I made sure the side doors were locked. I looked at the breaker panel, like I could intimidate it into staying on. Then I came back behind the desk and opened the paper registry. We didn't have a fancy system. Just a binder with plastic sleeves and printed room sheets. Names, dates, payment method, plate numbers if we had them, basic stuff. I flipped through the pages, counting heads the way you do when you're alone and bored and trying to make sure you aren't missing something. Room 2, dog couple. Room 5, duffel guy. Room 7, woman in knit hat. Room 10, empty. Room 12, marked occupied. I stopped. Room 12. That was odd, because I didn't remember checking anyone into 12. I had checked in the dog couple, put them near the lobby because the wife had asked. I had checked in the duffel guy because he'd tossed his ID down like he was tired of existing. I'd checked in the woman with the hat because she hadn't looked up once. But room 12? I stared at the line. It had a name written in the box, not typed, written. Paid in cash, no plate number, no notes, no signature on the card, which was unusual even for cash. You still sign the form. It's how the motel protects itself. And I couldn't remember seeing anybody for that room. I told myself the day shift must have taken it. Maybe someone had checked in earlier and I just hadn't been told. That happened sometimes. People forgot things. People were human. Still, a little irritation climbed up my spine, because if you're working alone overnight and something goes wrong, you want to know who's in the building. You want to know who to count. I leaned toward the security monitor and switched through the camera feeds. The rooms all had exterior doors, so the cameras could catch arrivals if you knew where to look. I rewound the feed for the last few hours. Snow, snow, snow. A car at 9:15, dog couple. A truck at 9:40, duffel guy. A small sedan at 10:20, woman in the hat. Nothing else. No headlights turning into the lot. No doors opening. No figure trudging up the walkway. And still, room 12 was marked occupied. That's when I felt the first pinch of unease. Not fear. Unease. Like realising your house key is missing and you don't remember the last time you had it. But you also don't want to say that out loud. I flipped the page back, then forward again, like it might change. It didn't. I sat there for a minute, listening. The lobby was quiet. The heater clicked. The wind outside made the building creak like it was settling. I could have let it go. I could have said, not my problem. If they're in there, they're in there. If not, whatever. But curiosity is a stupid thing. It feels harmless until it puts you in a spot you can't undo. Around midnight, I decided to check. Not to be brave, not because I wanted trouble, just because I didn't want to get blindsided later. Before I went out, I did something that seemed logical at the time. I called one of the occupied rooms. I started with the dog couple. They answered after a few rings. Front desk, I said. Just checking. Everything okay over there? Storm's got us pretty locked in. A man's voice, sleepy but polite. Yeah, we're fine. Dog's fine. Appreciate it. Can I ask something quick? I said. Did you see anyone come in after you? Anyone else arrive? He paused, like he was thinking. No, just us. We watched a guy carry a bag, but that was it. Okay, I said, thanks. I hung up and stared at the registry again. Then I called the duffel guy. He answered with a grunt. Front desk, I said. Just checking if you need anything. Nah. Did you happen to see anybody check in after you? Silence, then a short exhale. No. Click. Then the woman in the knit hat. It rang longer. I almost hung up. Finally a quiet voice. Hello? Sorry to bother you, I said. Front desk, just making sure you're okay. I'm okay, she said quickly, like she wanted the conversation gone. Did you see anybody arrive after you? Anyone go into room 12? I haven't seen anyone, she said, then softer. I'm just trying to sleep. Right, I said. Sorry. I hung up. No one had seen the guest. No one had seen the arrival. And room 12 was still on my list like a fact. I grabbed my coat, my flashlight, and the master key. I stood by the lobby door and watched the snow through the window for a moment, letting my brain go through every boring explanation it could find. Day shift mistake. Wrong room number. They checked in earlier and stayed unseen. A friend slipped them a key. The registry line was left over from last week and nobody cleared it. All possible, and yet my body was already reacting. the way it does when it knows something is wrong before your mind catches up. I pushed the lobby door open. The wind hit me like a hand. The cold grabbed my throat. Snow blew into my face and instantly melted against my skin, turning to icy water. The outdoor walkway lights were still on, yellow circles swallowed by white. My boots sank immediately. The snow was deeper than I expected, up past my ankles, filling the walkway edges like foam. And the sound, it wasn't silent, the storm wasn't silent, but it swallowed everything else, made the world feel padded, distant. I kept my head down and walked toward the rooms. Room 12 was on the far left side of the horseshoe, almost around the bend, away from the lobby. As I approached, the doors all looked the same. Brown paint, peeling numbers, frost on the frames. I stopped at 12. The light above the door was off. That didn't mean much. Some guests turned them off. Some bulbs died, but it made the door look like a dark spot in the storm. I shined my flashlight on the number. I listened. Nothing. No TV noise, no movement, no cough, no toilet flush. I raised my hand and knocked. 1 knock, 2, 3. The sound felt small, eaten by the wind. No answer. I knocked again, harder, still nothing. I stepped back and looked around the snow at my feet. And that's when I saw them. Footprints, clear as handwriting, leading away from room 12. Not a bunch of messy tracks from different people. Not footprints from guests going to their cars earlier. Not the scattered stamps you normally see around a motel. Just one set. One pair of footprints pressed deep into the fresh snow, starting right at the threshold of room 12, as if someone had stepped outside, closed the door behind them, and walked away into the storm. I stared for a long moment. My flashlight beam caught each indentation. A boot tread, a heel, a toe. Very real, very human. My first thought was stupid and automatic. Okay, so they're here. They just stepped out. Then the next thought followed, sharp and cold. When did they step out? Because I hadn't seen any movement on the cameras. Not near that side. Not anywhere. And the snow was falling heavy, filling things fast. Footprints should soften, blur, disappear under a fresh layer. These were crisp, like they'd been made recently. I swallowed and looked up at the storm, like it could explain itself if I stared hard enough. Then I followed them. I didn't want to, but I did. Each step I took sank into the snow and made my legs work harder. The footprints led away from the door, off the walkway, into the open part of the lot between the wings of rooms. The lot was basically gone, just a white field with lumps where cars were buried, shadows where curbs used to be. The footprints moved steady, not panicked. A straight line, like someone walking with purpose. I shined the flashlight ahead, the beam cutting through snow like a weak knife. Wind pushed at my back. I looked behind me once. The motel lights glowed dimly through the storm, looking far away even though it wasn't. The footprints continued, 5 steps, 10 steps, 15. Then they stopped, just stopped. No turn, no stumble, no swirl, no second set leading back, no drag marks, no scattered snow like someone fell. The last print was there, deep defined, and beyond it, untouched snow, smooth and clean like no one had been there at all. I stood over the last footprint and felt my skin tighten under my coat. I moved the flashlight beam around, searching. Nothing, no trail, no continuation, just blank white. My mind tried to fix it. Maybe the wind filled them in beyond that point. Maybe I lost them. So I stepped forward carefully, scanning the ground. Nothing. I moved side to side, like maybe they'd veered. Nothing. The storm hadn't erased the prints behind me. They were still crisp, So why would it erase only the ones ahead? I could feel my heartbeat in my fingers. That's when the unease tipped into something else. A kind of dread that isn't loud. It doesn't yell. It just sits heavy in your chest like wet clothes. I looked up. The snow was blowing hard enough to sting my eyes. The world was just wind and white. And I had the strangest thought. This is where people die. Not from monsters, not from ghosts, from weather, from a wrong step, from getting disoriented, from thinking you can handle it. But these footprints weren't disoriented. They were deliberate. And then they weren't there, I whispered without meaning to. Hello? The word left my mouth and disappeared immediately. No answer. Of course. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, because my brain was stuck on the idea that there had to be an explanation. And in that second I realised something else. I couldn't hear the motel anymore. Not the faint hum of the building, not the heater fans, not even the distant buzz of lights. Just wind, just white. I turned back toward the building. For a moment I couldn't see it. I walked quickly, forcing my boots into the snow, following my own footprints now, like a lifeline. The motel came back into view, like a relief you didn't know you needed. When I reached room 12 again, I stood at the door, breathing hard. I looked at the handle. The curtain inside was still drawn, the window dark. I raised the master key. My hand hesitated, because opening a door is a commitment. Once you open it, you can't pretend you didn't. I slid the key in and turned. The lock clicked. I pushed. The door swung inward. Cold air and stale motel air mixed together. The room was dark, but not pitch black. Moonlight reflected through the snow outside gave it a faint grey glow. I stepped inside, flashlight up. The room looked untouched. Bed perfectly made, blanket tight, pillows aligned, no suitcase, no jacket, no shoes by the door. The bathroom door was open, light off. Towels folded like they'd never been touched. The little trash can was empty. Even the room smell was wrong. No body heat, no perfume, no sweat, no fast food, just detergent and old carpet. I checked the closet, empty. I checked behind the curtains like an idiot, half expecting someone to be standing there. Nothing. It was a clean, empty room, except the heater was on. I noticed it because the vent was warm. The unit hummed softly, steady. Someone had switched it on, unless the maid did, unless it turned on automatically. But I had been here enough to know those heaters didn't turn on by themselves. They barely turned on when you asked. I stood in the middle of the room and felt my throat go dry. Then I backed out slowly and shut the door. I locked it again, even though I didn't know why. I trudged back to the lobby, snow biting at my cheeks, and once inside, I peeled my gloves off with shaking fingers. I sat down behind the desk and stared at the security monitor. I pulled up the feed for the left wing. Room 12's door was visible in the corner of the frame. Nothing moved, no door opening, no person. I rewound again, still nothing. Like the camera had decided that part of the world didn't matter. I looked at the registry binder again. Room 12, name, cash. I stared at the handwriting. It wasn't messy, it wasn't rushed. It was neat, almost careful. The kind of handwriting someone uses when they want to be taken seriously. I thought about calling my manager, but what do you say? Hey, I think we have a ghost guest. Number. So I didn't. Instead, I did the thing people do when they're scared and want control. I focused on procedure. I wrote a note in the margin. Room 12, no occupant found. Investigate. Then I sat back and waited for morning. The night dragged. A couple guests came to the lobby for snacks. Short exchanges, minimal words. Everyone had that storm-dulled look. At one point the dog barked down the hall and wouldn't stop until the owner hushed it. I watched the camera feed, expecting to see something. Nothing. At around 3 a.m. the power flickered again. Longer this time. Lights dimmed, the heater hesitated, the monitor blinked. Then everything came back. But when the monitor returned, the left-wing camera feed was frozen. Just a still image of the walkway, snow blowing past the lens. I stared at it, then switched to the next camera. That one worked. The right side worked, but the left, frozen. I got up and walked to the back closet where the DVR box sat humming. I pressed buttons, tried to reset it. No change. I told myself it was just the storm interfering, but the timing felt personal. I went back to my chair. I didn't look at room 12 again that night. I didn't go back outside. I didn't open that door. I stayed in the lobby where the lights were, where the heater worked, where the world still felt like a place with rules. When dawn finally started to grey the sky, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like being caught after doing something you shouldn't. Around 8, the storm slowed. Snow still fell, but softer. The wind died down, leaving that heavy, muffled quiet you get after a blizzard, like the world is holding its breath. A plough showed up, pushing a wall of snow like a moving cliff. A tow truck followed behind it, slow and careful. My manager arrived around 9 in a puffy coat, eyes narrowed against the glare of white. He walked into the lobby, stamped snow off his boots and said, "You survive." "Yeah," I said. I slid the registry across the counter and tapped room 12 with my finger. "There's something weird," I said. He looked down. "What is it?" "I don't remember checking anyone into 12, I said. "No one saw them. Camera shows nothing." He squinted at the page. "This name looks like Marcy wrote it." "Marcy wasn't on shift yesterday," I said. He blinked. "Yes, she was. Until 4. "No," I said, and I surprised myself with how certain I sounded. "She called off. It was Don." He stared at me for a second. Then he flipped through the binder again, like he could find the truth in paperwork. "I'll check it," he said finally, but his voice had lost some of its casual edge. We walked out together, crunching across snow that had crusted over, sun making it sparkle like broken glass. When we reached room 12, he knocked. No answer. He unlocked it, pushed it open, and stepped inside. I stayed in the doorway. He looked around, same as I'd seen, perfect bed, no luggage, no signs. He frowned. "What the hell?" he murmured. He walked to the heater and put his hand to it. "It's warm," he said. I nodded. He stepped into the bathroom, opened the shower curtain, checked the towels. Then he came back out and stared at the room like he was waiting for it to change. "I don't like this," he said quietly. That was the first honest thing he'd said all morning. We went back to the lobby. He made a couple calls, one to Don, one to Marcy. I listened without trying to. Don swore he didn't check anyone into room 12. Marcy swore she hadn't been there. Manager stared at the phone after the calls ended like it had betrayed him. He looked at me. "Are you sure you didn't, miss somebody?" I felt heat rise in my face. "I'm sure." He rubbed his forehead. Okay. Then he did something that made my stomach drop. He crossed out the entry, not neatly, aggressively, like erasing a mistake. He grabbed a fresh sheet, rewrote the occupancy list, and left room 12 blank. "There," he said, "fixed." Like reality was a typo. I watched him do it and realised something. He wasn't trying to solve it. He was trying to make it disappear. And that made it worse, because if it was just a weird clerical error, you don't get that look in your eyes. You don't cross it out like it's dangerous. Before I left, I walked back outside alone and stood by room 12. Daylight made everything look innocent. The storm was over. Cars were being dug out. Guests were laughing in that exhausted way people do when they survive inconvenience. The snowfield where the footprints had ended was now churned up by plough ridges and tyre tracks. The footprints were gone. I looked at the door. Number 12. Just paint and metal and cheap locks, I told myself. It was paperwork. It was confusion. It was the storm messing with cameras and memory. But there was one thing I couldn't shake. Those footprints. Because I had followed them with my own eyes. And they weren't messy. They weren't half-filled and they weren't fading. They were crisp and fresh and human. They walked out into the snow. And then in the middle of a blank white lot, they stopped like someone had been picked up, or like the world had ended right there. I quit that job a month later, not because of that alone. Night shift wears you down anyway. But I'll tell you this, I've been in storms since then. I've seen snow swallow roads, I've watched wind erase tracks behind people, but I've never seen footprints that stop in clean snow like that again. And I don't stay in motels anymore, not the small roadside ones anyway, because every time I pull into a lot like that, every time I see doors lined up in a row like teeth, I think about room 12 and I wonder, quietly, even now, how many rooms are occupied by people no one remembers checking in.